Blizzard have made a lot of mistakes over the years, from this to this to this, and with the new hero leaked recently and the official release over the horizon, I want to explain how some of these creations failed or succeeded. Something clearly went wrong in developing these heroes, and to work out both what that was and where to go in the future, we need to know how to make a hero. Blizzard have dropped the ball repeatedly and often for seemingly very little reason, when I think there's a pretty common theme to how to create a hero well, and there will be quite a bit of speculation here because we don't know exactly how Blizzard created their heroes in general. We don't know what order they came up, we don't know what root of the concept, we don't know how that progressed and how the kit tied together as time went on. We do have information on a couple of characters because they are more heavily documented, but some we just have to speculate on. So, number one, skill to value scaling. You have to have the character feel like they have something to learn into the high ranks and at the low ranks. And the things that can normally skill to value scale are like positioning, mechanics, aim in general, a game sense, ability to tell flow of the game, things like that. There's loads of different skill to value scalings you can have. Not necessarily aim, but you do need some sort of skill to value scaling on the hero. Two is having really good high-level skill outlets. Nothing to do with the skill to value scaling, but having really good things to have at the high level, and having really good onboarding at the low level. Not necessarily the way that this scales, but having that low onboarding that you can get into the hero, and having something really high up for you to scale into. Number three is feeling fair to play against. So, not complete bullshit. We do not want roadhog hooks in there. A lot of that's to do with having good telegraphing on the abilities, not turning up and insta-killing you, not having free access to space to be able to do an infinite mount into you. Loads of other things like that go through the kit in order to make it reasonable in this regard. Number four, the hero has to be good to watch in order to be a good kit. I think that's pretty reasonable, not in terms of esports, but in terms of generically played. They need to look good from third person. I think that's reasonable. Number five, I'm going to say is design space. And what I mean there is I want the hero to be an interesting type of thing in the video game. I want the hero to be unique and diverse and something we haven't already created. All of those type of things. Six is fantasy. When I say fantasy, I don't just mean fantasy. I mean fantasy design, all of those type of things, all of the visual theming that goes into a character, all of the stuff that knits together to make the character feel good, to be in and to play. And just like the Genji effect, right? The amount of people that played Overwatch specifically because of Genji and no other reasons. And then I think 7 to me is utilizing the concepts in the kit properly. There's a UCP. What I mean there is I don't want good ideas ruined, right? I don't want things that could have been an entire hero shoved into the kit and completely broken for no reason in particular, just because Blizzard were like, haha, and this, right? Is the rivals idea. So many abilities and rivals being good concepts that don't get worked on. Are there any other things you can think of in terms of things that make a character feel good in terms of their design? Am I mostly hitting most of the nails on the head? I need a way to get a team to create this, right? I need a team of 30, 50 people to be able to do this together, right? All of these things at the same time, and I don't have control over who's ahead of each other, right? The art team could be ahead, the ability design, workshopping team could be ahead. We could have a cool concept, and we really love that cool concept, or we could have a place that we want a character to be built into, and we could be like, we really need this, and we need to be able to tell people. So there's basically three ways that I think you root this kind of a development process, okay? And this is what I call the root of a hero or anchor of a hero, and this is the center of the mind map for the hero when you create it. Three things, right? Theming, design space, and then gameplay concepts. So these three things are what I consider that you can root a team around, right? If you have a team and you really need the team to work on something and it be completely cohesive, you need something to root them around. And I think this is how the Overwatch team does it from my experience, right? Theming, okay? You can root a character in a theme. Winston, right? Winston's this character that very clearly is a monkey, right? That is the start of the character. That's where they started. You could also say that the gameplay concept of being a monkey that jumps into the enemy team was part of it, right? We got a theme, and the gameplay concept fell out of the theme, and then instantly we're on a roll, and all we needed to do after that was come up with complementary concepts to complement this, right? So the bubble is a complementary concept that just complements this entirely. The Tesla gun playing around the bubble and the cleave from the Tesla gun is something that really validates the gameplay concept. And then we barrel back into theming because we have a bubble and we have a Tesla gun, and we just say, well, he's a Winston, he's a scientist. Okay, so he's a monkey scientist, and we've got the gameplay concept and the theming in once. And I don't know which way Blizzard did this, but it seems like it could have easily fell out of somebody saying, okay, I want a monkey that can jump into the enemy team, right? And you can completely guide your team through that concept, right? These are like the core roots of a hero. And then we go on to a more recent character, much more recent character, Juno, okay? So Juno's this character where, how do you think Juno started, right? Where do you think the development concepts for Juno came from? We got these three things. Do you think it was missiles? Do you think it was double jump? Do you think it was glide? Do you think it was speed? See, this is an interesting one because Juno is so well knitted. I think Juno is the most cohesive character they've ever created in the video game. I think Juno is excellent, not in terms of what it does to the game, I don't care about what it does to the game, but in terms of how they seem to have created it. What I see very clearly is I see, first off, incredible theming, right? Double jump, glide, ring, missiles. The space theming around that is completely cohesive, completely one-to-one. Even the gun seems like it came off ground as a concept for what you would do for a space character. Then I think, okay, well, a gameplay core. What is there a concept in Juno's kit that you think created the character, right? Is there any particular concept that we couldn't remove from this character without it damaging the theming? Well, you can easily remove that. Speed ring obviously is incredibly core to the character, but you could remove the speed ring and this kit still works. The glide, right? You can remove the glide, you can remove the double jump, you can remove the gun. All of it's removable, weirdly enough. Like, it doesn't need to all be there. So the only other conclusion I can reach is that in order to get this kit, where we started from a design space place. And the design space place seems to have been, I want to create a tempo character that can provide speed to a team, like Lucio. That seems to be where they started, right? If anyone disagrees, please tell me. Obviously, this is speculation. But it seems like we started with tempo character, speed ring, gave us hints into the theming, gave us hints into the design element. We got the speed ring. What can we do with the speed ring? Well, the speed ring enables us to get us fast into places. So maybe we pair a movement ability with that to be able to keep up with the team. Maybe we pair it with the missiles. And you see how from design space perspective, you can come up with the theming and you can come up with the gameplay element pretty much immediately just from that. The way they spoke during that time, it's clear they wanted to have something to do with Lucio's niche. Yeah, 100%. This was the core of the hero. This was the root of the hero. On the whiteboard, at the start, before they started developing it, was we want something to do with Lucio's niche. So we've got Winston, that's clearly a theming hero that gameplay elements fell out of. We've got Juno, who's a design space hero that gameplay elements and theming fell out of. The next ones, and we're going to start going down the rabbit hole here. Orisa. Original kit of Orisa. Okay? Shield, fortify, pull. What was the root of that original kit? And I'll bring up the possibilities. What do you think the root of that kit was? The original Orisa kit with the shield, with the pull, and with the fortify. What is it going to Ryan's niche? It was a design space niche. Yes. Do you remember what we originally said when Orisa first came out? What did they call the hero? Does anyone have the phrase? What did they call Orisa originally when they first came out? Anchor tank, there it is, that phrasing. An anchor tank, okay. Well, the anchor tank niche was a design space consideration. The only problem being with Orisa is this design space didn't exist, or they couldn't create it, or they didn't know what it was. What is an anchor tank? An anchor tank wasn't really part of the design space in the first place. Reinhardt wasn't an anchor tank when it really came down to it. He was played at an anchor tank at the low ranks, but he wasn't really an anchor tank in the same way. What they actually did by making a ranged anchor tank with all these mitigation abilities is they made a character that can sit on the other side of the choke and murder people going through it much better than they made a character that can go through a choke themselves. We need a hero for Hanzo to ride into battle. Excellent. Yes, so Orisa is one of these, like, misguided. Oh, we wanted design space, but we actually screwed up our understanding of what the design space was in that. Interesting. Same theme. What did they call this guy? And it's a great meme. I love the memes around Ram. What did they call Ram? Tempo tank. Yes, tempo tanks. And what did they mean by tempo tanks? I think they were closer to the nail here. Essentially, what they meant by tempo tank was the character can press a button to take the tempo when it is advantage to them. And do you know how they failed on Ram in particular? If you have a character that can take the tempo without demanding the tempo themselves with their button, what you've necessarily done is you made a character that only wants to take the tempo when advantaged. So Ram only presses his form when he can kill something, and that makes him incredibly passive with the block. So what they actually did by saying, okay, we want a tempo tank, we want them to be able to go, right, really hard, go, is what you did is someone that waits really hard as well. So it's another case where we started with a design space, right? We started with the design space here. We said, okay, we want a character that can take the tempo. So we're going to say, well, take the tempo, right? Gameplay elements straight out of design space. Gameplay elements straight out of design space there. And when they're not taking the tempo, we have a way to hold space. So that very clearly pulls out of each other, doesn't it? But we were a little bit wrong about our design space, weren't we? We're a little bit wrong about our design space there, because by doing certain things, about not by engendering aggression into the enemy team, like with Reinhardt or like with Winston, forcing them to take space aggressively, we ended up making them passive. I think the idea of a tempo tank and what the concept was of a tempo tank was mistaken. Next one. Okay, we're going down a little bit here. You notice I started with good and we're going down. Lifeweaver. What was the root of Lifeweaver's design, guys? Out of curiosity. It's either a gameplay concept. So, for instance, the root of the gameplay concept, I'm going to say here, for Lifeweaver, is this. That's the most core bit of this kit. Theme? Sexy healer? A little bit, yeah. Was that the core of the concept, do you think? I think the core of this concept, and this is obviously speculation, and you can call me out on this, was the design space. Again, this was them attempting, as you say, Nif, to make Mercy 2.0. They were very obviously clear about saying they wanted to make a character that was more similar to Mercy in the same way that Juno was more similar to Lucio. But they failed to understand what makes Mercy good. They failed to understand the things that Mercy does in the game. They failed to understand how consistent, reliable healing sources can be at a lower healing number. So essentially they released him, but because he had these big fucking globs, right, that peel a lot, but they peel instantly, they completely broke the hero. And then they were like, well, we have to make a kit around it. And I think another concept flying around was obviously the life grip at the same time. I think he needed the burst. And I think this, and this kind of fell out of the Mercy thing as well. Because we needed a way for him to be able to generically survive. And I think this is kind of like a core concept that is slightly adjacent. This concept, the pulling somebody up to high ground, right? The angular support kind of a guy. This is what Lifeweaver does, and Lifeweaver does it well, but they failed to root it properly in the kit. So this is a situation where instead of starting with the design space concept, they should have started with the gameplay concept, because they couldn't work out how to make the design space work. So how did we make the design space work? We made it so there's 2 petals, 2 dashes, so you can petal up to here, you can dash over, you can petal up, then you can grip. And that also sorted out a design space, because you can use the grip aggressively and make the grip optimized around the center of the gameplay. And that's what our design basically tries to do. We try and make it so that grip is the center of the core of the hero. Because if you don't do that, the grip ends up being problematic very quickly. So that's us rooting around a gameplay concept instead of rooting around design space there. And I rooted around the gameplay concept to do design space, but I optimized for the gameplay concept. And that's why, despite everything, my grip in my Lifeweaver Live is actually a lot more healthy than Blizzard's one. Go on, guys. How do you root this guy? How did Blizzard root this guy? Theming? It's a little bit difficult, isn't it, guys? Because Blizzard had this guy in development for so ridiculously long that by the time they kicked out all of their things that they considered and weren't working, the only thing left was the theming, right? Apparently he had one gun that was a grenade at some point, one gun that was a flamethrower at some point, big berserker brawler with lots of damage. Yeah, you see that. But big berserker brawler with lots of damage isn't actually part of the design space. It's just a theme, right? So we started with a theme and we had nothing to connect it, and so we had to pull elements from different places together, and even in the playtest they weren't concreted on the design space. If we have to choose a gameplay concept in order to root this hero, we have a Firewalker Mauga. Right? A Firewalker Mauga is a brawl Mauga that optimizes for overrun and tries to live with overrun. If we try and route around a poke Mauga, we optimize for the burn effect like we've done in our mode at the moment, which is we optimize to make it so that you can survive independently with all the kit. And basically what you see is as you work down a kit, you're basically picking a core, and that core is normally around your theming or route around your theming, and then you're going tick, 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 and making everything work with the hero as you go down. Then you check for kind of like skill scaling, and then you check for kind of like sharp interaction. But for the most part, this is how you start. Big guy with 2 guns that charges. That was the design for the PvE missions. They forced everything around. Exactly. It was the original PvE character, wasn't it? The Mauga type charger with the swords on his hands. So it's interesting to see here. And I don't know exactly where Wu Yang is going to fall, right? I don't know where they're going to fall. Do you think they're going to be targeted around theming? Do you think they're going to be targeted around the design space that they want for their hero? Do you think they're going to be targeted around a gameplay element that they thought was so cool that they had to build a hero around that, and everything else flows around that gameplay element? These are the 3 ways that I think with a big team, you can actually root the hero concepts and get everyone onto the same page to work together. This is the hero fantasy, okay? You know, I haven't used that term. The hero fantasy is these, and the way they knit together. You can have hero fantasy not just be how the hero looks and the hero feels. You can have hero fantasy be a lot of different things. So I tried not to use that word for most of this because I thought it might confuse people. Do you think Blizzard had enough time to scrap hero designs if they're not working at about 30 to 50% of finishing the hero? What do you mean by scrap hero designs? I mean, Mauga was in development for years. In terms of time, I think they cook until they think it's ready. I think Mauga was released in a crunch of them not having heroes from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2's release, because what essentially happened was they had to release extra heroes when they had no extra heroes in development. So Kiriko and Sojourn and a couple of others came out real fast from each other. They had to up their production speed, but they already were at max and they hadn't done anything for a couple of years. So I think Mauga was the exception, right? Not the rule there. So you can go through pretty much all of these heroes and you can kind of like pick out how they were designed. Yeah, I want to bring that to the new hero because I feel like that's a really important discussion to have.